Hello, I'm Danielle Strachman, co-founder and general partner of 1517 Fund. Join me and Sachin for the Ochakde Show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ochakde Show. We're Silicon Valley's first business podcast for teens, hosted by a teen. I'm Sachin Syal. I'm a 16-year-old award-winning entrepreneur and podcaster from the Bay Area, and I interview remarkable and influential people from all walks of life so we can learn from their stories and level up ourselves. The purpose of the show is to inspire you to go for it, which is what Ochakde means. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of 3doshas.com. We're a lifestyle coaching platform, and our goal is to transform lives through coaching principles inspired by yoga and Ayurveda. So, today's amazing special guest is Danielle Strachman. She's an extraordinary VC, the founder and general partner of the 1517 Fund, and they back dropouts, renegade students, and sci-fi scientists at the earliest stages of their companies. I mean, she's an investor in companies like Loom and Luminar Technologies. Like, who doesn't know those companies? She was like one of the first investors in those companies, which is so cool. And she was also a founding team member and the program director for the Thiel Fellowship. And she directly worked with Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel's a legend, so is Danielle, so that's awesome. and and a fun fact about her as well, she founded and directed Innovations Academy in San Diego. That's a K-8 charter school, and that serves 400 students. But it's kind of different. It's actually a focus on student-led project-based learning and other alternative programs. And a little bit of background, I met Danielle through a competition where I actually pitched this show and I won some prize money, which was awesome. And she was one of the judges at the conference. So it's really cool that I have her here today on the show. So yeah, welcome to the Check the Show. Thanks again for being here. How are you and what's new and exciting?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me here, Sachin. What's new and exciting? Oh gosh, new and exciting. I should have had a better answer for this already prepared. Well, actually, one thing that we just finished that was new and exciting. Actually, okay, this will lead into new and exciting.
Okay,
So, and I think this will be very relevant for your audience, actually. We
cool.
just finished having a summit in Florida. We did our first space summit. We've done summits in the past, both at the Thiel Foundation and with 1517, but we've never done a themed one before. And we had 200 young people out from all over the world. And space is such a great theme because it's something that people can really rally around and be part of, even if they're not working in this space. And it was just really, really fun. Like we had, actually, we really lucked out. We did it in Cocoa Beach, Florida.
Oh,
And
nice.
there were 2 launches that actually happened while we were there. Sometimes you go out there and you're like excited for a launch and then it gets scrubbed and you're like, oh man, bummer. But we got really, really lucky in the morning of the first day of our summit. SpaceX had a launch and we were located at a hotel that was right on the beach with all the attendees that day, which was actually really great because we ran 200 people outside. We kicked off in the morning. 20 minutes later, we were like, okay, it's go time for this launch. Let's run out to the beach. 200 of us ran out to the beach, watched the launch. And, for most people, it was their very first,
Yeah.
seeing it in person and not on a screen launch before. And then we ran everybody back inside and went on with the rest of our conference. And we actually had Austin from Luminar keynote, which was really great. And then that night, we had this guy, Kiko, who's a VP of launch at SpaceX speak. So it was really amazing to hear him talk about what we saw earlier that day and that we even got to see it. And that leads into what's new and exciting, which is in October, and we just did that conference a couple of weeks ago. In October, we're doing we've wanted to do like a teen summer camp for a long time. But teens summers tend to be very scheduled, years in advance. It's like, oh gosh, how's this gonna work? So we decided to shift our summer camp to fall. So we're gonna do a fall camp with probably 20 or 30 young people, probably ages 14 through 16. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna bring in our deep tech founders and those scientists that we have to come in and present about the cutting edge of different industries and new research areas, and then also, of course, have a lot of sort of like self-driven sessions and whatnot that the teams will be producing too. And we want to do a bunch of fun stuff too. Like, okay, let's do some activities. We want to bring back certain culture that's kind of been lost. Like prank culture has been very much lost. It's like not okay to do pranks anymore. And we're like, no, let's bring that back. So we're really excited for our October event. And it's our first time having something that will be very explicitly teen focused. Like most of our stuff is more general community, but this is going to be very much targeted at just introducing teens to maybe fields that they wouldn't normally get that much of a high level overview on, and then seeing what happens over time. Hopefully we inspire some people to go into some really interesting sort of sci-fi tech work.
That's actually so cool. I mean, like, wait, were all those people like young people, like teenagers as well that went there?
So with the summit, it's a mixed group, but we had a ton of teens there. It was really awesome. I would say the average age of the group was probably between like maybe 18 and 22, but a pretty young group overall. And we asked people if they wanted to bring their like younger siblings or cousins, and it was so cool. I was like, oh my gosh, like people actually brought their little brothers and sisters. Like how awesome. So it was really neat. It had kind of like family vibes going on. And we also actually this was cute too. We had a bunch of dads who came out for it because I think like dads in space kind of go together. That was really cool.
That's so cool. Can we talk about like, what's like your background, right? Like, I mean, I know some other VCs, but you specifically want to help young people. Did it start from like starting the school and then Thiel Fellowship, or how did this 15, 17 stuff all like start?
Yeah. It's interesting when I've been in the working world, like the adult working world, for about like 20 years at this point. And a lot of it started, very far back when I was in my early 20s. I sort of discovered my own personal mission, which is to bring freedom and autonomy to young people. And that's been a very big guiding principle over a long period of time. I did not know even if someone had asked me 13 years ago when I was just starting at the Thiel Foundation, would you want to work in VC? I would have said like, what's VC? I didn't know anything about the industry. So if I had asked my 20-year-old self, oh, do you want to be in VC? She would have been like, the who and the what? So I didn't start off thinking, oh, I want to be an investor or I want to work with companies or something like that. It was more this personal mission of, I want to bring freedom and autonomy to young people, and that looks different ways over time. So at one point that looked like a tutoring company that I ran, that I started working a lot with homeschooling populations. And those communities really opened my eyes to just how capable young people were. I think I had a pretty good sense of how capable they were, but that as an adult or as like a teacher or as a parental figure, how seriously you could actually support them. Because I got to watch the homeschooling parents that I worked with really do lots of things for their children in terms of like taking them seriously, and their hobbies and interests were like major, it was like it was the children's form of work. It was like, okay, this is what they're putting all their time and energy into. And the parents aren't just like, oh, isn't this cute that they do X, Y, or Z? It was like, no, we're gonna like travel here to go to this conference and this particular topic, and we're gonna do this and that. And so, they really showed me what something could look like when it was really child driven. So that was very, very inspiring. And that philosophy of allowing people to follow their own path and being a support system has been a very overarching thread throughout when I worked with homeschoolers. And then when I was at the Thiel Foundation, when I started there, sort of that's the same philosophy that was baked in, is like, an older young person's, like homeschool program. And sometimes at 15, 17, what we talk about, we sort of say it in a jokey way, but we'll say we're homeschooling CEOs. Where it's like, okay, like we want this to be an environment where people can try new things and learn and bring things to fruition. So those are some of the themes. But the thing that got myself and Michael to start 15, 17 is that we were both on the founding team of the Thiel Fellowship. And, especially 13 years ago when it started, it was highly experimental. just the notion that someone would say, hey, maybe the right thing is not to pay for young people to go to school, or make people go out and get a PhD and all these other things. Like, maybe grant money could be for supporting a young person's project, and we'll see where it goes. Like, we'll give $100,000 to a young person to work on something, instead of saying, hey, you have to be in school during this time. That was completely radical. People hated us for it. And it was also interesting because the program was a 2-year program, but I always said it's a 2-year program with a 10-year timeline, because I knew what we were doing was like planting seeds, very much like a garden, where it's like, all right, we're planting seeds, we're giving people the time and resources to see what might sprout. But it's not going to be like, oh, look, there's a huge oak tree here now. It's going to be like, okay, there's some seedlings here. But, we sort of had this sense of like, this is going to not just be like some gap year program where people had sort of a nice time and then returned to whatever. We knew that it was making a significant impact in people getting started. And that's like for people like Dylan Field with Figma. So these are all like household startup names now. Vitalik with Ethereum. I knew Ethereum was like totally common when over Thanksgiving, my mom was like, yeah, this Ethereum thing. And I was like, wow, my mom knows what Ethereum is. That's interesting. Ritesh with Oil Rooms, Laura Deming with the Longevity Fund. And when we were selecting these people, no one knew who they were. And there wasn't like, the reason we were backing them was because we saw potential, not because they had already done all these successful things that we could mark and say, oh yeah, this person's going to keep being successful. And what we also saw was that the investment community did not take our program very seriously. They did not take young people very seriously in the same way we wanted them to. So there's a lot of lip service in Silicon Valley about young talent, but it took me a long time to realize this. But I think what that translates to is not investors saying, oh, I want to give you money to start a company, but hey, please come work at my portfolio companies is more of what it means. And so we said 8 years ago, we said, gosh, we're seeing all these extraordinary outcomes. And if VCs aren't going to take our young people seriously, maybe what we need to do is we just disintermediate that by becoming VCs ourselves. And we were like, okay, we don't know how to run a VC fund. We don't know like what the operations of that entails, but we know we have this novel thesis of working with these types of renegades. And we think we could continue it and have like a fellowship 2.0. And we took that idea to Peter. We were pitching Peter, hey, please don't be mad at us for leaving our jobs. And we were at a breakfast meeting with him. And he said, well, how much money do you guys want to raise? And we were thinking maybe like 10 million bucks to get started, like as like a micro nano fund. And, Peter's always very thoughtful. So he thinks about it for, a good, good handful of seconds. It wasn't minutes, but it was like, you just see the wheels were kind of turning. And he goes, you should raise 15 and I'll be 4 of it. And I was like, what? we were literally, and this was not a strategy. We weren't like, oh, we're going to ask for advice and get money. Like, we were just really naive, and we were like, we're going to go and we're going to tell him mea culpa. Like, we're going to leave the foundation to start this thing. We just want your blessing. And then, when he opened the wallet, we were like, what? Like, this is amazing. We left that meeting, and I remember turning to Michael and I was like, oh my God, we have to really raise a venture fund now. Like, we have to do it. And, very fortuitous to have an anchor like Peter on board. And we put the fund together from there to keep moving forward with this mission of, backing people without college degrees.
That's actually amazing. What a great story. And I think homeschooling CEOs is such a great way to say it. I really like how you guys thought of that. It's actually very cool. I'm a founding member for this ed tech startup called Schoolhouse.world. It's started by the founder of Khan Academy, Sal Khan. Yes, and we use both Figma and Loom. So it's actually so cool. These companies have like become huge, and you guys are like one of the first investors in them. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been exciting. And just for clarity, so We worked with Dylan through the Thiel Foundation, but we're not invested through 1517.
Yeah.
He was already
Okay.
like off to the races going. It was funny when, when Adobe and Figma came out with the big announcement, people were like, congrats, it's amazing. Like, and people were saying things like, I can't, what a windfall, like meaning cash. And I was like, just want to make sure we're being very intellectually honest. We're not actually invested, but
Oh, okay.
worked with Dylan. And yeah, it's interesting in the investment world because people are funny. They, in some sense, they only take you seriously if you put money behind something. And it's like, okay, our fund was so nascent and Figma was already so advanced. We're like, we think this is outside our purview. Of course, if we were doing it over again, we would probably make a different decision now. But it's yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's interesting. I could talk a lot about how even when we were at the foundation, as soon as we created the fund, we got taken more seriously just as human beings. It's like when I would, reach out to people about maybe coming and speaking to Thiel Fellows and stuff, and people would be like, oh, that's that nice little nonprofit program. I don't really have time for that, or I don't really do things like that. And as soon as we started the fund, we would reach out to some of the same people and they'd be like, yeah, let's have a conversation. I'd love to talk to you about it. And it was like, wait, what? I don't get it. So there's psychological differences for people between nonprofit and for-profit, and if you invest or don't invest. So
Got it. I've always been curious, why is it called 1517?
oh, sure. Yeah, so that's my colleague's fault. 1517 is the year of the Protestant Reformation. And so at that time, there was a big institution, the church, saying, hey, to be counted into the kingdom of heaven, you need to buy this piece of paper called an indulgence. And Martin Luther said, I just think that's wrong. I think you should be able to have your own sort of, the crux of it was like, you should be able to have your own relationship with God, like without paying for it. And, myself and Michael at 1517 were not particularly religious people. And sometimes it's funny, like we would go on hikes and we'd have the 1517 shirts on, and sometimes people would stop us and say, what's that? And then they'd think we were like, maybe like a proselytizing group. And I was like, no, like we're a venture fund. But we like to say that the parallel is that, today there are large institutions telling young people, you have to pay for this very expensive piece of paper to call yourself an educated person. And we also like to say it was bullshit then and it's bullshit now. And we're working to change that.
That makes sense now because 1517. That's actually a really good name. I like it.
It's a great name. Michael is very good at naming things. Michael is the most well-read person that I know, and he also loves history. And so he just knows a lot of different references that will like pull into 1517. And it's been very valuable over time. It's funny, I don't even know, that he thinks of himself as someone who's like good at naming things, but he's excellent at it.
Yeah. I saw a video from like 2017 with you and him. Like this girl just comes into your guys' office and interviews you guys and you get coffee and stuff. Yeah, I saw that video.
Yeah. No, I just saw Mehek at a wedding recently. It was awesome to catch up and just be like, hey, remember when it was such a different time. We had an office in San Francisco. Yeah. Michael and I both lived in the same place. Like Michael's in Colorado now. I'm still in the Bay Area, and our team's expanded a lot. We were 2 people for the first few years of 1517, and now we're 5 full-time people, and we're 10 with part-time people, and that's not like a huge difference, but it's still a big change for us, where it's like, oh, we're like working to grow into what does it mean to be an institution that has some staying power? Once you get to your 3rd fund, some people would say you're still an emerging manager. Some people would say like, okay, you're like good to go at this point, and we're gonna raise our 4th fund, probably in like a year and a half. And at that point, it's like, okay, we're thinking about longevity, and how do we give 1517, or how do we make 1517 a platform, that can support people for years to come.
That's awesome. Can we talk about the school you started? I think that's really cool. Yeah. Can you tell us about 400 students? That's amazing. So how did that work, and why did you choose to do an alternative school?
Yeah, gosh, so yeah, it's so interesting. It's so great that like when you have something that moves, like it grows and becomes its own entity. It was me and my co-founder Christine who started it. and now the school, I'm on the board, but, I haven't been actively, an operator there for a long time. So it's cool to see what's happened over time. But myself and Christine, well, first off, Christine had 4 children that she homeschooled, and she had a homeschool co-op that she ran out of like literally her garage. And there were just tables in the garage, and homeschooling families would come over. And she had called me one day, and she knew I was a tutor. I don't know where she got her information from. It's actually really wild, because she called me and she said, "Oh, I heard you teach creative writing." I did not teach creative writing. I mostly taught math. I was totally open to working with people on writing, but I was like, I think I don't know, maybe there was some natural sales at play, because she's like, "Oh, we're looking for a writing teacher for our homeschooling co-op. Like, all the different parents teach different subjects, but none of us teach writing. I've heard you teach creative writing." And I was like, "Sure, yeah, I could totally teach creative writing." And taught this really fun class to this group, and really got even more saturated in the homeschooling world. And one day Christine came to me and she said, "My children," and she's very like child-led in her approach, and she says, "My kids are starting to come to me. They're around middle school age, and they're saying they want to go to school, but I keep checking out different schools and I don't like any of them." And the ones that she did like were very impacted by a wait list. It was like, High Tech High is one of the premier charter schools in San Diego. And I remember she told me she went to like a parent session there, and she said there were hundreds of parents in the room, and this one parent raised their hand to ask a question, and they said, "You all have like 20 spots for kindergarten, but my kid is a 6th grader, and the chances, all these parents in here, the chance of my child getting into this school are very slim. What's my family gonna do?" And the whole room erupted, and Christine was there, and she's watching this, and she's like, "Wow, there needs to be more choices and more schools for different types of families." And she also had this inkling of, could we scale the homeschool co-op that we had going on? Because we would often have parents who would come and say, "Gosh, I wish I could participate in this, but I'm a single parent. Like, how's that going to work?" And so she came to me one day, and, we were running our happy little homeschool co-op, and she said, "I'm thinking about starting a school. Would you want to do it with me?" And I remember telling her, I was like, "Why would we want to start a school? Like, we hate school." And, she told me what happened at High Tech High, and I said, "Let's both go to our respective corners for the next like week or two. Let's write down what we think a school would look like, and then let's come back together and compare notes and see if we have like similar vision." And what was interesting is we had very similar like vision for what it would look like. And so I thought, okay, well, from a vision perspective, it seems like we want the same thing. So let's start working on it. So we started working at a coffee shops in San Diego, like writing up a charter petition. We went to a charter school conference, which actually got us in touch with some grant funding that helped us get started. And the whole ethos was like, could we embed what we were doing at the homeschool co-op in terms of child-led, in terms of things like social emotional curriculum? Today, Innovations Academy is about 15 years old. And 15 years ago, if you said social emotional curriculum, people looked at you like you were an alien. I remember we went to this one conference, and we knew what we wanted. We knew what we wanted, like a social emotional program to look and feel like. But we didn't see anyone like packaging it in the way that we wanted. We didn't want to have to like invent it from the ground up. And I remember we were at this one conference, and I was in this one session, and these people were presenting a framework called 8 to Great, actually. And it was exactly what I wanted. And I remember I ran to Christina. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I think I found the people who are doing like the type of thing that we want, where children are really listened to as individuals." And it's not just, sometimes social emotional programs turn into teachers saying that they feel bad about what's happening in the classroom, and it's a huge guilt trip. And it's like, okay, that's not what this is supposed to be about. So it's interesting now, actually, that social emotional curriculum is like embedded in so many schools now. It's interesting to have watched. I've seen this a lot in my career, where things go from being really absurd sounding, like the Thiel Fellowship or using a social emotional curriculum, to becoming the norm. And so that's really, really fun. But we worked on getting the school started for 2 years. We got it approved, and we opened our door to 160 students in San Diego. And it was really just a life-altering event. Myself and my colleague went from never having run like a, you know, I would call it a real organization before, to running something with public stakeholders. And we had 14 staff members, and her and I used to pass each other in the hallway, and one of us would always lean in and go, who allowed this? Like, who allowed us to open this school and run this? And how are we in charge? Like, this is crazy. But the students loved it. I mean, students would come and say, gosh, like, I've never been somewhere where, like, we have like a no homework policy. We believe that young people are learning all the time, and you don't need to have all these have-tos on top of stuff. Or we have a, first name policy. I was just Danielle there. I wasn't Miss Danielle. And so just very even footing with students, and the projects, and being facilitators of learning over saying, okay, hey, we're going to do what the teacher says to do today. So that's how we got started, and still on the board today. And it's just, there were 8 charter schools that started the same year that we did, and only two of those schools are left. Innovations is one of them. Schools are very hard to operate and maintain. And when we opened, it was 2008. So, we were going through a recession. So we had to also be really vulnerable. And, that Sunday night call to parents, hey, this week, bring in, paper towel and toilet paper and reams of paper, and like anything you can do to help, because we were going through massive budget cuts at the school level. And we all needed to band together to get through it.
It's really a great initiative, and it's cool that out of the 2, you guys are one of them. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, outside of your professional life, I know you like cats a lot, but what are some of your other hobbies?
Yeah, absolutely. Other hobbies, I love to do anything like movement related. Before we started chatting, you and I were talking about dance. I love dance. I love yoga, rock climbing. I'm getting into running. I haven't been on a run in a while, and I went on one yesterday. It was really great. So yeah, anything to sort of get me in my body instead of in my mind is where it's at. I also grew up in a musical family, and, have taken guitar lessons for a few years, but in the past I was classically trained on clarinet. So music has been a big part of my life. And the arts have also been a big part of my life. And I would love to focus more in that area. It's interesting. There's sometimes like certain blocks to practice, and like, okay, I just got to get the paints out. I just got to like do the thing. But I aspire to do more art, particularly in the painting realm. And I'm like, I have my corner set up where I'm gonna do it. I'm like, I just gotta sit down and do it.
Nice. Actually, if you see that, that thing right there, yeah. I got that like a long time ago from Vegas, and the person did it in like 2 minutes, and they took like this thing and wrote my name, and they did it in like this pattern. I can't move my computer, but I think it's really cool. I used to like sketching celebrities and stuff with pencils.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I should probably continue, like, after I did all this other stuff in school and now my podcast, I should probably start that again, because you get like all that creative. Like, I used to listen to lo-fi music and just sketch a lot. It was really fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great thing to do.
Of course. Okay, these are the last 2 questions that I asked to all my guests.
Sure.
The first one is, what's your best all-time advice for teens?
The advice that I've been giving recently has been like, really focus on your skill building. I think that being able to like take on new skills and really have fluency in them is something that we are better at when we start younger. So anything that you sort of want to learn and develop, I just really recommend taking time on it. And then the other piece of advice that kind of ties into it is really think about what are the things that you're personally driven by, instead of thinking about, well, what are other people telling me to do or showing me, like basically like not being mimetically driven in terms of doing things because it's really what you want to do instead of what you think other people want you to do, which is it's a hard trap because it's hard to actually become aware of what our underlying motivations are sometimes, but that's something certainly to think about.
Yeah, that actually unfortunately happens a lot. Some of my friends like, dude, like when you do this podcast, you actually get like super cool people or really successful people. Like, why are you doing it? Do you actually like it? I'm like, yeah, of course I like it. I'm just doing it because I think that's what you're supposed to do. I'm not doing it
Yeah,
because for others. I'm just doing it because
yeah,
I
because you like
somehow
doing
thought
it.
of it. Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
All right, last question of the day is what was your favorite part of being on this show for Teens the Ochakde show?
Oh gosh, my favorite part. Gosh, I mean, I can just tell how much like you love doing this show and you ask great questions and there's a real warmth behind sort of like why you're doing this and how you're doing this. And so just being with you, Sachin, is just fabulous.
Thanks. Yeah, I typically like when you did your presentation at the conference, I just took a screenshot of your email. Like I'm gonna cold email her. I'm gonna get her on my show. I did
Yeah.
that to a bunch of people and it works out. So it's
Yeah.
really awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, great to be
Okay.
here.
Awesome. Well, that's it for today, guys. Danielle, thanks again. Actually, anything else, any last words of wisdom you want to share with the
Oh,
people?
I would just say if anyone wants to reach out, just like what you did, shoot me an email, Danielle@1517fun.com. I love hearing what people are up to and what they're making. Shoot over a Loom video, that's always fun. And yeah, hopefully I'll hear from some of your listeners.
All right, awesome. Well, guys, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.